No. This is it? Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, so I'm Neil Aria. Many of you know me. I represent an organization called Canadian Physicians for Research and Education in Peace, cprep.ca. This is a new organization founded about a year and a half ago. We've got a couple of our other executive members, Doug Alton and Barbara Burkett there. This organization is meant to fund different initiatives that concern peace from a health point of view. We are associated with Physicians for Global Survival, and you will find out a bit more about PGS from the President-elect, Juan Carlos Chirguin, who's going to be coming up in a couple of minutes. But CPREP is a new charitable organization, and we thought that it would be very important to try to get the message out. And I think you're going to see that much of what we have here is education on peace writ large. But beyond that, there are a few other things that you may not normally associate with peace, and some of the things that are more advocacy related PGS is responsible for, because CPREP is not supposed to be involved with advocacy. And we'll talk about that at another time. We have a lot of sponsors here, and this could not have been brought about without the financial and other support from various organizations, from the Canadian Medical Association to different universities, the University of Waterloo, Conrad Grebel College, Wilfrid Laurier University, Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, Fanshawe College, McMaster University with the Office of the President, Child and Family Health International, and the Population Health Research Institute has been a great supporter of events that relate to health and peace. And I'm probably missing a couple of people, but you can find, or a couple of organizations, but you can find the names on our website for the PEGASUS conference, which all of you have seen, www.pegasusconference.ca. I don't think you can be here if you haven't seen the website. For those of you who are physicians, we do have continuing education credits, and you can ask our volunteers about that. Andrea Levy has a few pieces of paper for you. For specialists, this is worth 18 hours, up to 18 hours of study credits, and for family physicians, up to 20 hours. But if you want more information on that, you can ask Andrea. In terms of CPREP and PGS, we can talk more about that. For those of you who are students, I should mention that CPREP also has a studentship. The deadline is approaching for that. If you wanted a bit of support, I think it's up to $2,500 for a project that has to do with peace through health, but you can find that on our website. And if you know of people who are students, we have one for that's designated for a medical student, and one for a non-medical student, or could be a medical student. So we have a great number of people who've helped with the planning, and I would like to acknowledge them at the beginning. We have Rob Stevens at the back here, who's our coordinator, and Elena Antonio was our coordinator before, and she should be here sometime later. Then we have Andrea Levy from the Office of CPREP and PGS in Ottawa, and she'll be around too. There's some people who aren't around who helped with the website, Sébastien Chiazon and Jenna Lee. We have Charm Simon, who's been coordinating between us and the hotel, various people here from the hotel, headed by Philomena Pereira. We had Michael Webb, who is who's designed some of the graphics, like the Pegasus graphic, and then the people who are doing the AV, who are at the back there. So a big thank you to all of them. So others here, various people on our planning group, many of who can't be here, and those people are from not just around the country, but around the world, people with tremendous international health expertise. Some of them are going to be facilitating, so you'll get to meet a few of them. And then we have a whole bunch of volunteers who've been there at registration who are going to be recording things. I'll at least introduce the coordinator if you have any problems, but thus far they've been amazing. The thing about the volunteers, which is different than most conferences, is that our volunteers are paying to be volunteers. They're paying a little bit to assist with the conference. And I think that that's really the way that the whole conference is, our organizing committee giving up a lot of time. Basically, we haven't had the funds to support various people, so many of our keynote speakers or many of our speakers have arranged for their own funds. So I just have to thank everybody for coming together to try to make this event the wonderful event I expect it will be. So our two main people, if you're having any particular issues with logistics, are Rob Stevens, our conference coordinator, and then Priya, who is our volunteer coordinator. We have a number of speakers that you will get to know. Sorry, I'm having to look there and try to see if I can recognize names as I tell you a bit about people. And I may go to my notes. We'll go through the schedule of people, but we've got people speaking about Indigenous health, people speaking about refugees and other marginalized populations in Canada. Elizabeth May is starting off with the eco-health theme, which we'll have this morning. We have people from South Asia, such as Ziauddin Yousafzai, Malala's father. We've got people from Latin America, such as Alfonso Morales, who's over there, and Sophia Wolfbrandt, and Mary Carmen Valdivieso. We've got people from Central Africa, Pakiza Shamika, whom I don't see is here yet. So we've really tried to encompass the world in terms of our speakers and the issues too. So I think that you'll find an exciting event. And I really see these people as being all-stars. They are my dream team. When I was thinking about any of the themes of the conference and the people that I would like to have, for me, these are all people in the top 4 or 5 people that I'd want in the world. So thank you all for being here. So those are some of our speakers. We will have Louis Francescuti, who's the president of the Canadian Medical Association, tomorrow. So having that type of recognition from the CMA, from the Ontario College of Family Physicians, which is supporting us. A lot of the people in the room may see themselves as being more activists or advocates. Again, a dirty word amongst some people, but for physicians, in fact, being an advocate is considered one of our main roles. And as a medical teacher, I'm associated with McMaster and Western. That's one of the main roles of a physician. So being an advocate amongst physicians is not a bad thing. So we have people here. Many of us are people who have suffered in different ways, people who might be refugees. We have Setsuko Thurlow, who arrived this morning, who's a survivor of Hiroshima, will be doing a keynote. We have people from the Palestinian context, again, who've managed to become healers despite suffering. And Ziauddin and his daughter Malala have paid a high price for advocating for peace. But as you'll see when he arrives tomorrow, that has not made them bitter in any way, but more advocates for peace and education. In terms of our layout here, you can find things on the website too. We've had to have a small change that things, is it Muskoka 2? Which room is it that we switched from Collingwood? Oh, it does say it, okay. I can't see what it is, but we had a little bit of a technical problem with some water in the one room, so we've had to switch that particular room for each of the sessions. So Muskoka 2 changing to Collingwood. And as Thomas takes a picture, he's from Collingwood, so he must have something to do with that. But Collingwood has a lot of water, I understand, too. So the Wi-Fi password, we've tried to not have too much on paper. So many people nowadays will have their computers with them, and so there's the Wi-Fi password. You can also download the program off the website in a PDF or Word format, and there's some minor changes from there, but very minor. So the Wi-Fi password you should all have. We have tried to make this conference adapt to the new realities in terms of social media, and Gina and Thomas are trying to teach me about that, and they'll be tweeting throughout the conference, as we will have some other people. And I encourage you all to do that if you are so inclined. We've been putting Facebook updates on our various speakers, and we'll continue to do so after the conference. Our various themes, so peace, global health, and sustainability. I was going to tell you a story about PEGASUS, which you can read on the website. It's actually quite apropos our themes in terms of bravery, fighting against odds, and working towards justice. But within peace, sustainability, and global health, we see different aspects. And when we come down to issues, it seems like they are all interconnected. Those of us who have studied or worked in peace studies, we view peace as largely being health. Johan Galtung would certainly say that. You don't have peace if you have structural violence. And people who look at global health locally, they see a lot of what marginalizes people as being structural violence. Global health also, in terms of determinants of health, that the first determinant of health mentioned in the Ottawa Charter is peace. So there is a direct connection that way, and in terms of sustainability, the same way. That sustainability is part of ecological peace, and it is important when we think about the health of the 7 generations before and after us. So the sessions, we will have plenary sessions, workshops, and the workshops will be largely according to our 4 themes: global health locally, global health internationally, peace, and sustainability. We'll have research symposia, which many of you are contributing to. We've got some posters, but beyond that, we will have actual research presentations during the symposia time. We will have some film screenings, which I'll talk about here. We've got several people who have authored books. Ryan Miley will be signing later today, and Ziauddin will be doing a book signing tomorrow. And then we have our banquet. For those of you who are registered for the entire conference, the banquet is included in your registration. So some people have asked questions about that, but if you're registered for one day or just coming to your workshop, the banquet is not included. if there are any issues with regard to that, just ask Rob or Priya if you still have to get tickets for things. People should have their meal preferences already established. We're also having a few people coming. We wanted to raise some extra funds, so we have a few other guests who are not associated with the conference who are paying $100 for a ticket for the dinner, of which $50 is tax receivable. So if you have any contacts who still want to come to the dinner, you can talk to Andrea or Rob and still get tickets for them. So this is our schedule for today. Which most of you have seen. So after me, on a Dr. Juan Carlos Chilguin qui vient du Québec. Alors on a quelques personnes du Québec. Et, lui, elle a un nom comme Juan Carlos, mais son nom de famille c'est anglophone, or you said it's Cornish. And so he got so confused with the Spanish and English that he decided to live in Quebec, and he's our Francophone representative this morning. Then we have, I did want to say words of welcome in different languages for people, even though Alfonso, él viene de Ecuador, y yo quise hablar español, no puedo hablar quechua, pero tenemos mucha gente de todas las partes del mundo. Tenemos también, we have Lucilla de Italia. So this conference really feels very international. So, but we must actually begin more locally before we branch out internationally. And I think that maybe this is a good time to introduce the Smokes, Dan and Mary Lou. They're well known in Southern Ontario. They have been known on TV and radio. They have a show, Smoke Signals. They're, just as this is a meeting to get people together, they're also from different tribes. Dan is from the Seneca tribe, and you're Ojibwe. And so they've gotten together from northern and southern Ontario. At lunchtime, we're going to have a film. Maybe you might tell us a little bit more about the film, Chantal Richmond's film, Gifts from the Elders, because you come from a community very close to where the film takes place. And you, I have seen, really appreciate the importance of water and what happens with in terms of environmental degradation and community being lost. So Chantal Richmond, who unfortunately isn't able to be here for a fortunate reason, she just had a baby, we still have a film here, and we will have some other Aboriginal speakers throughout, including Alfonso, but maybe you could tell us about that. But I will leave this for you to welcome us in a formal way, then Dan and Mary Lou.
Okay, congrats.
Thank you.
Where I come from, when we greet one another, we say bonjour. So bonjour. Asanyenes kwe and dejnakas, makwa dodem, bachwana be dunjaba. Ready? Okay, for those of you who don't speak Canadian, I'm going to translate what I said. I said in the Ojibwe language that my name is Shooting Star Woman. I'm Bear Clan, and I originally come from Batchewana Bay, Ontario, which is on beautiful Lake Superior. And the film that Neil was just talking about, they filmed some of it in my community of Batchewana Bay. And so, like, I know the elders that they talk to and the younger people, but I grew up there and I was always in the water. Like, you'll see the water is so shiny and so special. I always talk about the shininess of the water and how important that water is to all of us. You know, nothing on earth can survive without that water. But I'm going to let my husband introduce himself to you before I, just take over the whole thing.
Where I come from, we say sego, so sego. And that's in the Seneca language. We are from two different language families. The Algonquian language family, which encompasses Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, Mi'kmaq, Cree, goes all the way from the Atlantic all the way across to the Rockies. And then I'm from the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee language family, and we are in the Great Lakes watershed all around there because we're agricultural people. So you can see that the land that the Algonquian language family traveled upon was much more greater because they were hunter-gatherers. But Toronto is the home of Seneca people from going right back to when the glaciers were here and receded. This was caribou country, and then it became beaver hunting grounds. And then they coexisted with people known as the Huron, the Wyandots, and then the Ojibways, the Mississauga people, came later. And so when the beaver population was decimated by 1630, the Mississaugas were still here. Meanwhile, the rest of us had all left and gone back to, like, this was our summer home. Toronto was the summer home for the Seneca people. And we are originally from the Allegheny Mountains of New York State. So we are hill people. So we come from the mountains down there. But this was our summer home because of the beaver. And one of the words that we always say to each other, and I'm going to ask you to say it, is scannel. And it's spelled S-K-E-N-N-E-N, but that means peace. So scannel. And that's when I remember growing up with that term being used as a greeting to everybody, between elders, between young people and elders and young people, back and forth. And I never really understood what that term was because I thought it meant hello or hi or greeting. But actually it means peace, because in the Great Law of Peace Constitution, of which I am part of, the Iroquois Confederacy, peace amongst all people, the power of unity amongst all people, and the righteousness, the welfare of all people, were the tenets of the great law of peace. So peace is very important. We talk about the great peace all the time. Whenever we come together, we always say the words of the great peace, scannel, and that's the Thanksgiving address. So oftentimes, if you ever go to another event and they begin with the words that are said before all others, they say, the Gyankwaloni. Those are the Thanksgiving address words of welcome, and they are also the words of peace. So it's very fitting that Neil has invited us to be part of this, because peace is what we are all about. We have always been about that. As in fact, even our warrior societies always remind us of the great peace. Conflict, confrontation was always the last resort. We always were trained and apprenticed and learned how to use our good minds to avoid conflict and confrontation and war. We would use our good minds to find the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms of peace to resolve all conflict. So that's why we always had protocols. Whenever we traveled into each other's territories, we had a protocol of understanding so that we wouldn't have any kind of territorial differences or imperatives. So it was always based on peace, and that's why we existed, and that's why we survived for so long, using our understandings of peace, power, and righteousness. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Lou, and I'm going to prepare a purification smudge. Well, actually, Mary Lou's already prepared it.
Yes.
So I'm just going to light it. We're going to use sage medicine. Sage is our medicine for communication. It helps us to listen to learn, and it helps us to learn to listen. It's important because the Creator gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth. And the idea was that we would listen twice as much as we speak. Now, obviously, we've learned a contrary behavior because we speak twice as much as we listen. So we have to get back, we're reclaiming that, because we are an oral culture. And this is how we learn. This is how we absorb wisdom, by listening. And Mary Lou and I have spent countless hours listening to the elders, because the elders are our knowledge carriers, our wisdom keepers. And so they are the ones we spend time with to learn their wisdom of our ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Lou, and I'll take it around probably through the front here, and then Mary Lou's going to grace us with a beautiful song.
Okay. Yes, Miigwech Dan. We do a lot of ceremonies in the city. Dan and I met here in Toronto in the early 70s. At that time, there was no drums, there was no smudge, nobody had a shelf to put the smudge in, nobody was carrying eagle feathers, and that's because of the potlatch law that was enforced upon us. They also took our children from us, and they put them in the residential schools, and if we objected, then our parents would get thrown into jail if they wouldn't let them take us. So they were trying to save the child, but take the Indian out of the child. So they made that potlatch law so we could not practice any ceremonies. There was also a law that said that we could not gather on a corner with 3 people or more. So they must have known how smart we are, because they didn't want us to be, doing to them what they did to us. So when Dan and I met, we both were looking for the teachings of the ancestors. And so we immediately bonded when we found out that each one of us had been in a sweat lodge. I'd been in a sweat lodge on Manitoulin Island when I was 19, and Dan spent his 20th birthday in a sweat lodge in New York with the Mohawks. So, that just that's held us together for all these years. We've been together for 42 years, and this summer we're going to celebrate our 37th wedding anniversary. But we do everything together. We smudge together, we do ceremony together, we do the radio show together. He does the talking, I do the teching. We do TV, and I say a line, he says a line. We go back and forth like that. And, we do everything together. So that's, I think, the secret of our relationship. So we have ceremonies in the cities, and Dan and I often have moon ceremonies for the women. Every 28 days, the moon shows her face, and every 28 days, a woman has a purification cycle. So the women are in harmony with the moon, and we are also in harmony with the water. The moon causes a gravitational pull and causes the waves to churn, and so the water goes from the top to the bottom, and that sand is used like a natural filtration that Mother Nature gave to us. So we use that water in our ceremonies. We bless that water, and we speak for the water. The Native women always talk about the water, like Ojibwe women especially. Our way is that the women take care of the water and the men take care of the fire. So they are direct opposites, but we're also reminded that as a person who takes care of the water, I could put out his fire. So he always has to mind what he's saying. So anyway, I want to start off with giving you an assignment. I want to teach you the song called the Water Song. And what I want you to do is take it back to your community and teach the children this song. They are going to be the ones responsible for speaking up on behalf of the water, on behalf of the Mother Earth, on behalf of the plant life and the birds and the swimmers. So they have a big job to do, so we have to start grooming them early. So this is called the Water Song, and I know people that Dan and I went to a ceremony with on the cliff of Lake Erie. We only knew the person who brought us there, and there was about 20 people. By the third verse, they were singing it, so it's really, really simple. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Hey ya, tene ya, hey ya, to start us off.
Wichita, do-we-ah, do-we-ah, do-we-ah. Wichita, do-we-ah, do-we-ah, hey. Wichita, do-we-ah, do-we-ah, do-we-ah. Wichita, do-we-ah, do-we-ah, hey. Hey-ya, Janaea, hey-ya, hey-ya. Hey-ya, Janaea, hey-ya, hey. Hey-ya, Janaea, hey-ya, hey-ya. Hey-ya, Janaea, hey-ya, hey.
That was really good. With a little practice, we could rent a bus and go on the road. So this is the last verse of the song, and we're going to sing this like our life depends upon that water, okay? Wichita, do ya, Wichita, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, Wichita, do ya, hey. Hey ya, Tanea, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Tanea, hey ya, hey. Hey ya, Tanea, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Tanea, hey ya, hey. Oh, Matakiwasan. If you forget the words, you can go to YouTube and key in my name, Mary Lou Smoke, and you'll find me singing that at Harborfront when I was there a couple years ago. So I'm going to turn this microphone over to Dan, and he's going to say the words that are supposed to be said before all others. And this comes from the Great Law of Peace.
So, Scano. Scano to each and every one of you. And also, I'd also like to say Bindagan, which means welcome. Welcome to this territory. It's formerly known as the land of the Mississauga, but it was also settled, and there was a coexistence of the Seneca, Wyandot, Huron, other peoples that always lived here. But I want to say these words, and I'm going to speak in my language, the Seneca language, to begin with, and then I'll go into the English translation. Nyawe sa gwaundizo, sa niyo es guatahas kit kontenwa wahase, chawise dodakwa, oskada nagohas, oida henahas. Grandfather, grandmother, hear our sacred thoughts, hear our sacred prayers as we bring our good minds and our good hearts here into the Sheraton Hotel, North Toronto, here in the city of Toronto, here in the traditional territories of the Mississauga, Seneca, Wyandot, Huron peoples. We bring our good minds and our good intentions here for the next 3 days that we are going to be here. So we want to give welcome and greetings to each and every one of you in our way, and so we are very honored to be able to provide this for you. We want to also acknowledge this beautiful Wanis Leo, this beautiful day that we've been blessed with to use in a good way. So we give greetings, we give thanks to this Wanis Leo, to all the life that lives in the water, all the life that lives on the water, the swimmers, the finned ones that take care of the water. The water, as Mary Lou said, is that feminine sacred element of life that all creation needs in order to survive. We wouldn't be here if the water wasn't sustainable. So we acknowledge the importance of that feminine sacred element of life, the water. We also acknowledge the earth, all the life that lives in the earth, all the life that lives on the earth, the plants, the medicines, the rocks, the minerals, the four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, us human beings, five-fingered, two-leggeds, the trees, all the life that lives in the trees, all the life that lives on the trees, the flyers, for they are part of an interdependent, connected, related life support system that continues to take care of our Mother the Earth. And again, Mother Earth is that other feminine sacred element of life that all creation needs in order to survive, and we wouldn't be here without our Mother the Earth. So we give greetings, we give thanks to her and acknowledge her. We give greetings, we give thanks to our Father Sky. Our Father Sky represents the air, and the air is that grandfather's breath, our Father Sky's breath, and he continues to follow his sacred instructions by breathing that life into all creation each and every day. So we acknowledge that our Father Sky continues to follow his sacred instructions. We also acknowledge the our eldest brother, the sun, who represents the sacred element of fire. Fire burns, that sacred fire burns inside of each and every form of life. And we acknowledge that that sacred fire is in all forms of life, and that brings all those forms of life alive, gives them life. And we, as two-legged human beings, are related to all that life. We are directly related, so we acknowledge that at this time, Grandfather, that our eldest brother, the sun, continues to travel across the sky. He shows his face, provides us with heat, provides us with light, each and every day. So we acknowledge the work of our eldest brother, the sun, and that he's still following his sacred instructions. We also acknowledge our grandmother Moon, who looks after all female life. And every 28 days, she shows her face. And when she shows her face, right now we are in the time of the planting moon. When she shows her face, she purifies and recycles the water, the lifeblood of our mother, the earth. So she continues to follow her sacred instructions, grandfather, grandmother, so be it in our minds. We also acknowledge our relatives, the stars. Our star relatives remind us when it is time for us to conduct our ceremonies of Thanksgiving. So we acknowledge our star relatives. And we also acknowledge the four protectors. The four protectors are those four celestial beings who look after all spiritual matters. It is they who have brought us from all around the world to come and be here at the Sheraton Hotel by the airport for the next couple days that we are going to be in each other's good company, because the Creator, Sagwayo Diesel, Gijamanedo, loves each and every one of you so much that she has brought you all here to be part of this conference together with everyone else that's gathered here. So in the spirit of our ancestors, we say, Walalan, Miigwech, Tapwe, Wache, Hashka Siem, Masicho, Pilamaya. To all my relations, we'd just like to say, Miigwech, Nyawe, all my relations, Daneto, Hai Hai. So I'm going to turn it back over to our brother Neil.
Thank you so much, Dan and Mary Lou. I think that this is really a fitting start to things. We had another conference a couple of years ago that many of us were involved with called Transcending Borders in London. And I think that a lot of people found that that conference brought a bit of community, and many of our volunteers have come from that. And I think that spirituality was also important in that conference. We had a ceremony on Sunday, which we won't have this time. Could you put my slides back on? Just so I do think that spirituality, however we view things, is very important to all of us, and I think that this is setting the stage for that, because people didn't want to just be together for 3 days. They saw this connection as being much longer. So thank you so much. We'll have people from different faith traditions and different cultural traditions as time goes on. I wanted to again mention the gifts from the elders here that we will be showing at lunchtime in one of our rooms. We have other films too talking about some of the threats to the world. Juan Carlos may mention this later. So arts and culture is also very important to health. We have artists tonight, Chris Brown, Joy Wright, and Jenny Whiteley, whom I think are here, but I can't see them. But art, music has been very important. Even tomorrow, when we have our evening program with Ziauddin and Malala, we will have artistic representations of the situation of girls, particularly when they're threatened in situations like Pakistan. We will have Bharatanatyam dance. This will be important. So the Bullets to Butterflies art exhibit will also be there. So I hope that you manage to take in these things, not just be intellectually stimulated, but also spiritually. We want to make sure that people do fill out their evaluation survey, which is available online. We'll have a few paper copies, but it's best if you do it online on our webpage. If you access that, you can find the place to click there and then fill out the form that looks like that. with the various sessions. So I want you to enjoy your weekend. I'm going to just have Juan Carlos say a few words on behalf of PGS. Then we will move into the subsequent people with the Canadian National Anthem that Warren will lead, and then he will introduce our keynote speaker, Elizabeth May. I should add, I've known Elizabeth too from the Pest Management Advisory Council of Health Canada a number of years ago, a very fun committee that we both were on. But we're really honored to have her be here. But Juan Carlos, maybe you could say a couple of words, and then we'll leave things with Warren. Could I also ask, is Mary Carmen here yet? Oh, there you are. Could you also, maybe you might sit with Alfonso for a minute, but you'll be helping with him during his presentation.
Thank you, Neil. And sorry, Warren, for making you put down your violin, because I was hoping we'd hear some music before I started speaking. I want to thank Mary Lou and Dan for opening up with this ceremony. It reminds me that there is so much diversity regionally, locally, and in the world. And if we don't appreciate the diversity that we have, languages are lost, cultures are lost, and this is as tragic as losing a child. My name is Juan Carlos Cherguin. I'm a family doctor. I work at a community health center in Montreal in a neighborhood called Park Extension. And there we deal all the time with ethnic diversity, diversity of languages, diversity of customs, different frameworks for looking at health, trying to understand what health is. And often the doctor has 15 minutes to deal with what we try and box into medical issues. And 15 minutes is not enough time. And I'm sure I don't even have 15 minutes to talk to you at this point. So I will just say that I am here as a family doctor, as a father, and also as president-elect for Physicians for Global Survival, which is an organization that is very small and that is struggling. And we're struggling for, at this time, we're working with many groups across the world to try and get a ban on one of the last weapons of mass destruction. And we're working with the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And there is a timeline. And we're also working with the ideas of sustaining an environment where we can actually drink the water, and where we can actually breathe the air and not suffer the consequences by inhaling radioactive toxins and other chemical toxins. I was going to say a lot more, but I'm going to make it short and sweet. How many? 2 minutes, 1 minute? 2 minutes, 1 minute? Anyway, I came from Montreal yesterday, and my head has been a bit of a mess lately. A lot of different things have been happening. I got on the airplane without my passport, and then I realized, okay, phew, it's just to Toronto, so it's Montreal is like a suburb of Toronto, so there's no problem. I don't need a passport. And then I realized, oh, I didn't have my credit card, and yes, I'm supposed to be the president-elect of PGS. I also noticed on the list here that the keynote speakers, I was the only one who was identified as doctor, and so that made me feel very distinguished, and it made me think of my father-in-law, who has been fighting for his life in the intensive care unit for the last 4 weeks. He was intubated with a bilateral pneumonia in the intensive care unit in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And in the first week where he was fighting for his life, he was at that point more conscious because we doctors hadn't completely drugged him up yet. And as he was sort of making hand signals to us, decisions were being made around his life. And he made hand signals, and then he was able to write something, and he said, "I'm a doctor too." And it's true, because he's a doctor in medical anthropology. And he was born in Calcutta, India, so he's been teaching South Asian anthropology, specifically in Charlottetown. And so I would like to recognize the other doctors present in the room and all of the other professionals who also have a lot of expertise to bring here. I'm very happy to see that we're going to have a lot of distinguished speakers. And like Neil said, I will say ditto. Thank you for all of the organizers, all of the volunteers, and thank you, Neil. I was there at the other conference, Transcending Borders, and I know it takes a lot of effort to organize these conferences. And this brings me to the question of why are we here? You might wonder to yourself, especially the medical students, why am I here in this sort of it doesn't look like the usual type of conference that doctors go to. And that's unfortunate because this is the kind of conference that medical students should be able to attend very easily, and we should actually be bringing this content into the medical faculties. And I'm also speaking for the other healthcare professionals, nurses, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, dental students, all of them. We should be speaking about basically the determinants of health, what makes us unhealthy. And in addition to health is the unspoken word of peace. If we don't have peace, we cannot have health. And if we don't address the root causes of lack of health and lack of peace, then those 15 minutes that the doctor gives to the patient, I find, are wasted time. And I do see a lot of patients, and I try and spend more time, like 30 minutes or 35 minutes. And I sometimes wonder if I'm wasting their time and my time because I'm not addressing some of the root causes of why they came to see me that day. And today we are here because we are exercising our freedom of speech and our freedom of association. I'll tell you a very quick story. My father he trained to be an agronomist, and in the Universidad de Chile, in the University of Chile in Santiago, after the military coup in 1973, military prosecutors occupied the universities, and they started interviewing all of the professors to make sure that they were going to root out any strange ideas like, fighting for access to care, controlling our own natural resources as opposed to them being controlled by foreign corporations. Anyway, ideas such as that. So military generals became directors of universities, and military prosecutors were screening professors to make sure that their bad ideas wouldn't negatively influence the students. And what we're doing today, gathering all of these people with different backgrounds, different cultures, different diversities, is we're exercising our freedom to think. We're exercising our right to gather and share ideas, and then hopefully also pass to action. Now, you might think that this only happens in Chile, Rwanda, Yugoslavia. It happens everywhere else but here. But we have our distinguished guests who gave us the ceremony this morning, and they can tell us that, no, this happened here too. And so we have to be aware of not only human rights, but we have to be aware of the determinants of health and peace. And we have to work to preserve them. And conferences such as these are the ways to allow us to move from the ideas to the actions. So again, thank you very much, Neil, and I won't take up any more time. I want to listen to some violin. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Warren Bell, and I'm a family physician, but I do a few other things on the side. I think this conference has got our musical side in the right order. We started with a song from the first peoples of this land, and now we're going to follow it with a song from the settler community, which is us. So please join me in Canada's national anthem, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'hymne national du Canada. Please stand up and sing. now to talk, and talk from an important person, I think, in this country and around the world. This is a little extract from a letter that was published in Lancet this month, actually, and since it's only one day in, it's pretty current. During recent years, Canada's reputation as a global citizen has slipped. In recent months, more precipitously than ever before, and in new directions. The Climate Action Network recently ranked Canada 55th out of 58 countries in tackling of greenhouse emissions. Results of other analyses show a government systematically removing obstacles to resource extraction initiatives by getting gutting existing legislation, cutting budgets of relevant departments, and eliminating independent policy and arm's length monitoring bodies. Well, if there was one person in this country who's standing as a bulwark against the decline in Canada's international reputation, it's our next speaker today, Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party of Canada. I've known Elizabeth for many years, long before she was a partisan politician. She was a person who probably, as much as anyone, has politics in her blood, starting with protests and activities in her adolescence and moving all the way up through work in the periphery and the central part of the government behind the scenes to now her current position of political ascendancy. Elizabeth is one of the least political politicians I've ever known. She is, before all, a citizen as opposed to a consumer, another term which I think we can banish for today. A citizen who really has stood up for values that almost everyone in this room could share: inclusiveness, respect for the ecosystem, social justice, and respect for all. I am very proud to introduce to you Elizabeth May.
Thank you, Warren, and thanks to Neil. And it was only, I'm sure, humorously that he referred to that committee as fun. It was a nightmarish committee, in fact. But anyway, we'll put that to the side. It was though in the days when the Government of Canada actually invited people like us on committees to advise on anything. Those were long ago, far away. And I also want to thank Dan and Mary Lou Megwitch for a wonderful opening, and for smudge ceremony. Certainly is a wonderful way to start and to remember that we're on traditional territories of other peoples. And I also am very honored to be the first official speaker, although you've had a lot of wonderful words already, in this PEGASUS conference on peace, global health, and sustainability. It happens to fall on my anniversary date. It is 3 years ago today. It was 3 years ago today that I was elected Member of Parliament for Saanich and the Gulf Islands. And as I reflect on the last 3 years, it's been an amazing honor and a lot more exciting and positive as an experience than you would possibly imagine. People are always asking me, as some of you did before over coffee, how I stand being in Parliament. I want to talk about the health of democracy this morning and link it into your themes of peace, global health, and sustainability. But I also want to start by saying some of your sponsors, and mentioning the Canadian Medical Association, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, which I think may not have been a sponsor, have been so helpful. And I just wanted to let you know, because I want your help on this as we move forward with it. My private member's bill calling for a national Lyme disease strategy earlier this week passed second reading unanimously. So it goes to Health Committee. We'll be developing a strategy for better prevention, diagnosis, and I know diagnosis is problematic, it's tricky, and moving on to sharing of best practices, working with provincial departments of health. And I have the support, as you can imagine, since the bill passed second reading unanimously. Now, there's a lot of hurdles to go, but they're all procedural. Right now, as you can imagine, all the parties are on board, including the Federal Minister of Health, Rona Ambrose. So if any of you are interested in this as a topic area, if any of you want to participate, I just wanted to start by saying, as I look at my 3rd-year anniversary, this is certainly something that I had hoped to accomplish, but a unanimous level of support for a private member's bill is pretty unusual, and I'm very gratified by that when I'm looking at the health field. I want to talk at a broader level, at a higher level of abstraction of what's going on in our country and on our planet, and I was invited to be pretty freewheeling in terms of what I did with this morning's time. And I'm hoping to finish in time. I know you're running very late now, but I'm hoping I have roughly the same amount of time, although I'll try to speed it up a bit to make sure we have time for discussion. But I wanted to start with looking at the World Health Organization definition of health. This is one that, by the way, the Green Party of Canada adopts as our definition of health. When we talk about public health, this is what we're talking about. We're not just talking about the healthcare system. We're talking about the World Health Organization definition of a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. So when we talk about health, that's what we're talking about. So there's a big dose of prevention in there. I'm grateful for the work of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. I see the leaflet in the materials handed out this morning. Grateful for the work of Physicians for Global Survival, and of course for the Canadian Physicians for Research and Education in Peace and Physicians for Global Survival as organizers of this conference. All of you are pointing to this larger understanding of what it means to have a complete state of health. And recognizing that the single largest social determinant of health is poverty, it's very clear that you don't just look at one aspect of society, like the healthcare system, and ask how that's doing to know how we are doing. But I wanted to apply this definition of health to the state of our democracy in Canada, to the state of Parliament, and ask if we can possibly describe democracy in Canada as meaning any kind of notion of being in a good state of complete physical, mental, social well-being. In other words, is Canadian democracy healthy? And I think we have to acknowledge, and this is an analysis that I would say applies to most modern industrialized countries today, that we are no longer democracies, we live in corporate states. Corporatist interests run everything in terms of where the priorities lie. In a sense, it's an oligarchy, or in Canada's case, an oiligarchy. It's dictatorship, punctuated by elections. Now, I hope this doesn't upset too many people in the room. I happen to believe that we are still, at our base, a democracy, and that with sufficient citizen engagement, we can reclaim the public sphere. We can restate the importance of collective well-being as the goal of governments rather than personal elitist wealth, which is really how everything functions. So when budget after budget in Canada in the last 8 years has, well, certainly since 2008, every budget has had jobs and economic action plan emblazoned on everything. Jobs and economic growth. We're always told the purpose of these programs is jobs and economic growth. A lot of the hypocrisy of that has been laid bare by the increasing revelations about the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. With youth unemployment in Canada at a pretty stubborn 14%, one has to wonder why we're importing temporary foreign workers to do service entry jobs. We used to think it was a shame that Canadian graduates from university would only be able to get jobs flipping burgers, but now they can't get those because we can get temporary foreign workers who will flip burgers for us, and assume that Canadian kids don't want those jobs. This is not just pandering to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program as the issue of the day. I think it's pretty fundamental when a society decides that we're interested in bringing 300,000 plus non-Canadians into our economy to take jobs, but we're not willing to give those people a single right. It's exploitative of the people in the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, at the same time as it has a very perverse impact on our own jobs market, as they call it. In other words, if you can get a temporary foreign worker to take a job for less than a Canadian kid, it will keep depressing wages for Canadians because of the exploitative use of people who come from other countries. I've talked to Inuit in Iqaluit who are really upset about the levels of unemployment in Nunavut, but the jobs there locally in the fast food places are occupied by temporary foreign workers. We don't think about this very much because we are happy to accept our cup of coffee from a fast food chain without really thinking about whether the person on the other side of the counter has a chance to stay and work and live in Canada. I'm very much in favor of immigration. It's not a xenophobic reaction. Think about the temporary foreign workers, and this is a health connection too. The XL beef plant that was slaughtering 6,000 cows a day, well, cattle a day, 6,000 a day. Holy mackerel. Didn't really turn my attention to the XL beef plant until it was the source of the E. coli a couple years ago. And then you started wondering, well, how is it that we've so concentrated corporate ownership that so many of the individual slaughterhouses in this country have gone out of business? Everything's concentrated. So a third of all the beef, I think it was a third of all the beef in Canada, was being produced at this one plant, the XL beef plant. And then you start looking at, well, what's the workforce inside the XL beef plant? People who are on a slaughter line, and then, you know, they're supposed to cut a carcass a certain way. Each worker's a mass assembly line. So each worker has one specific cut they do, and the carcass moves along. And they're doing 300 animals an hour. Now, for safety, they're supposed to clean their knife between each one of their individual cuts. I know, for those of you, I am also vegetarian. I'm seeing some people looking very queasy in the audience. I apologize. The workforce was primarily temporary foreign workers from Somalia. So now you've got the corporatist element of this enterprise really clearly understood. Where's the trade union potential in temporary foreign workers from Somalia who have no rights here? Their relationship is contractual with their employer. They're not likely to be able to go to the shop steward on the factory floor and say, I want you to understand, I can't do what you want me to do. It's not physically possible to cut this carcass, clean my knife, and then go back and do another animal at 300 an hour. It's just not doable, because that is essentially saying they can no longer send the money back to their family in Somalia. The whole enterprise for which they have left their families behind to work in Canada at a meat packing plant will be taken away from them if they complain. Now, you can go to the website of the agency within the Government of Canada that runs the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, and it will say, workers are encouraged to contact us if they have any problems with their employer. Imagine how ridiculous that statement is in the real world of someone who's so disempowered and so desperate for the money to send home to their family that they're prepared to accept that contract that says they work for one employer. Recently, a constituent of mine from Maine Island was in the national papers pointing out that the entire, this is a whole other sector I hadn't thought about before, the helicopter pilot industry. Helicopter pilots who are Canadian can't get work because they put out for temporary foreign workers. I know, it's just a microcosm of the problem. It's just one little aspect of the notion that all that matters is that the largest corporations on earth make more money as quickly as possible. So what we think of as stewardship of natural resources, we started with Dan and Mary Lou and our connection to our water, to our land, to our resources, to a sense of gratitude to the Creator for all the things that are here in on this planet, within our national borders, that we should care for them with gratitude. Well, in the corporatist enterprise, there's no such thing as being connected to any one place. Capital is stateless, resource extraction is stateless, and now labor is stateless. And so it's all about, when, no matter who it is, whatever politician is pandering and talking about jobs and economic growth, it's become completely divorced from community well-being, from citizens' empowerment, from responsibility to a collective that says, we believe we're all better off when none of us are hungry. We believe we're all better off when our forests are healthy, when our waters are healthy, when the fish are healthy. This is as far removed from that, from a state of actual health of a society, as one can get. The more I study it, and I have been studying it a lot, and looking at, okay, I've been dissecting the framing, and you all know about politics these days, it's all about the framing, to say that we have responsible government that's looking after our well-being because the top priority for Canadians is jobs and economic growth. And for most people, that sounds pretty good. We'd like to have full employment in our society. We'd like to have a healthy economy. And the perversion of the whole thing is that absolutely nothing about the mantra of jobs and economic growth has to do with really caring about full employment for Canadians. It's so far removed from that. And this focus on the Athabasca oil sands as though it's the driver of our economic health. It's unbelievable how many people swallow that myth. Actually, it's a poor choice of word. I'll just back up and say that I acknowledge that myths are metaphorical ways of speaking cosmic truths. So claiming that the oil sands are a big part of the Canadian economy is actually a lie. Myth exaggerates its importance. The oil sands are responsible for 3% of our GDP. 3%. You want to look at something that actually creates a lot of jobs in Canada, that actually has something to do with stewardship, that we care about the environment when we do it, and that's tourism. Tourism employs more Canadians than mining, forestry, and fishing combined. But this is another part that I find baffling about the current Conservative administration, but it's part of the corporatist enterprise. Tourism is predominated by thousands of small businesses, and they're mostly local. Therefore, they're less important for some reason to governments. So if you look at the budget for advertising of the Government of Canada, you will find that the only money being spent right now by the federal government to advertise Canada in the United States is money to advertise the oil sands and the Keystone Pipeline. They eliminated the budget some years ago to advertise Canada as a tourist destination to people in the United States. Now, you'd think that's kind of a basic if you're looking at jobs, since it's the biggest, it's more jobs in tourism than mining, which includes the oil sands, mining, forestry, and fishing. Tourism. But the Canadian Tourism Commission has a tiny budget, and they've been told their target markets are Mexico, China, not the United States. I find this baffling, that if you're a U.S. citizen and you're riding along on the subway in Washington, D.C., what you see are ads for Canada is a good neighbor, take the Keystone Pipeline. But nothing about, come see our national parks before they're fracked. Come see our beautiful wilderness, what's left of it. Anyway, so having painted a picture that is not sustainable, not focused on health, not focused on democracy, I want to focus for a little bit of time I'm going to take before opening it up to questions on how we fix this. It is totally fixable because we have a lot going for us in Canada. We live in a democracy which we can reclaim. It is only an elected dictatorship because so many people have forgotten, especially in the media, what kind of system of government we have. We have far too many people who think we elect a prime minister. We have a lot of, I live far too much of my life in the sometimes ugly world of social media. I made the mistake of suggesting on Twitter yesterday that I would have thought that the decision to send naval vessels to the Baltic to assist the Ukrainian government would have come up for debate in Parliament. And there was a Twitter assault from the certain groups. You people want to debate everything. Some things just, well, in a democracy, one would think, back to the issues of global peace, that we might actually have a conversation before sending essentially a military venture to Ukraine. That might have come up for conversation in Parliament. It didn't. And then the discussion is, well, I was till late last night and till 11 o'clock Tuesday and Wednesday nights, we were in Parliament dealing with what's called the Fair Elections Act, Bill C-23. I put forward 84 amendments. They brought the gavel down on discussion of amendments when I was on my 44th amendment so that they could gavel through, because they'd set a hard deadline of midnight for last night, and gaveling through amendments without debate, even that takes some time. And it's as though, oopsie, I don't need this thing. I don't need this, I don't have any slides. I'm just knocking it over. You'd think that we'd understand that when we're debating something as fundamental as the law under which our elections are conducted, We might want to actually take the time to discuss it, at least have the pretense that Parliament reviewed every clause of the bill. You know, just for theater, if nothing else. We'd pretend that Parliament was looking at this bill. But the Prime Minister's office is in such a hurry to get this bill passed, they don't even want to let us pretend. It has to get gavelled through all at once. And and I do believe that in social media, this is one of the things I'm going to come back to in terms of what we can do about it, that some of the so-called people who are commenting aren't people at all, but paid lobbyists for various interests. And they operate anonymously, and they operate using certain tactics which are predictable, particularly the ad hominem nasty personal assault. That is to drive people out of the space. But immediately those people, and they're not people, who sent those Twitter messages are saying, you know, you would have wasted time in Parliament. What's the point of debating? It should have been passed ages ago. How many hours would you waste? Interesting analysis of Parliament. So we have to actually, which is unusual. I mean, I started, as Warren mentioned, we'd known each other a long time, but my first campaigns are very close to Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. The first things I got involved with were protecting the area in which I lived from airplanes distributing a fairly non-specific endocrine disrupting toxic pesticide over vast areas of our communities. We stopped them from doing that. That was back in the 1970s. Democracy worked a lot better then, and I never thought as an activist that it would be necessary to start protecting a functioning democracy within Canada. That is now what we need to do, because nothing else is going to go very well for us, whether it's an agenda to deal with nuclear disarmament, to deal with toxic contamination, to deal with protecting our healthcare system, to deal with eliminating poverty, to deal with acting on the climate crisis when there's still time to avoid runaway global warming. None of those things are going to go very well for us if we just move from one political party serving a corporate agenda to another serving a corporate agenda, while most of Canadians snooze through it and hope that things will go better someday. Reawakening democracy is critical. So what we have to do about it, and there are a couple things. One coming up fairly soon is the most important private members bill that's been advanced to protect Canadian democracy in probably a generation. And it's the Conservative Member of Parliament for Wellington Halton Hills, Michael Chong. His bill is C559, and it's a Parliamentary Reform Act. And the goal of it is, and one of the things I would already put forward in a different private member's bill of mine, but thanks to Michael, I can concentrate on my Lyme disease bill, eliminate the requirement for the leader of a political party to sign the nomination papers for every candidate. It's an Elections Act provision that was brought in the late 1960s when for the first time ever they added the name of the political party that a candidate represented and put that on the ballot. That meant the leader had to sign the nomination papers to say, yeah, that person is with our party. Big mistake. First time ever they gave the leaders of every party a really effective club with which to first threaten and then bludgeon anyone who didn't fall into line. The power of political parties operating as an overlay on Westminster parliamentary democracy is the threat. The power of political parties, and particularly the power of leaders' offices, which means in the context of Parliament, the power of the Prime Minister's office over everything. The concentration of that power is, right now, the largest malignancy on the body politic of Canadian democracy. So Michael Chong's bill holds tremendous potential. Eliminate the requirement for the leader's signature on nomination papers and allow the elected parliamentary caucus of any party at a certain trigger point to trigger a leadership review. I'm mentioning this to you because I know you're from different parts of the country, you have different MPs. It doesn't matter if you're represented by a Liberal or an NDP or a Conservative. Contact them personally if possible and tell them you're watching and you want them to show up and vote for 559, you want it to pass. Right now, Tom Mulcair says he favors the bill, but it's the first time he's allowed his caucus a free vote. A bunch of NDPers are saying, oh, they're not quite sure about the bill. Or they might not just show up. I promise you, as much as the NDP have policies that are significantly, obviously, better, wonderful, compared to those of the current Conservative Party, no party leader in this country really wants to give up their power except me. They want to keep it, you know? So when you walk into the Prime Minister's office, if it's a newly elected MP who has become Prime Minister, and this is another thing, we don't elect Prime Ministers, so I'm careful about my language. A newly elected MP who by his party process has become Prime Minister, we do not elect Prime Ministers, walks into that office and looks at the desk Stephen Harper has left behind and finds on it all the levers of power. Power to shut down science, power to shut down your MPs, power to say this bureaucrat isn't allowed to talk, or if they do talk, they have to say this. This is significant, and the loss of a respected independent civil service is going to be very hard to rebuild. But I worry that nobody walking into a Prime Minister's office is going to say, oh gee, I have too much power. Only the Canadian public in an election can point out to them that we want this to change. So our first opportunity for significant change is Bill 559, Michael Chong's bill. Please reach out to whatever MPs you know and tell them you want them to pass it. And if they come up with, oh, well, we're not quite sure this percentage is right, or we're not quite sure, get it passed and into committee. Second thing before I go to questions is get more active in the media where we have the public space to talk. Our national media is controlled by a very small number of corporate owners, and for the most part, they're comfortable with the status quo. A rare exception was editorial after editorial after editorial in the Globe and Mail attacking Bill C-23. That shows what happens when the media actually gets involved in an issue and decides to take it on. It's fantastic. But for the most part, the national media is not paying any attention to the climate crisis, not paying any attention to the threats to democracy. So please start writing letters to the editor. It can be about the issues you're talking about at this conference. At the end of the conference, a 200 or 300 word letter to the editor to your local papers will help, but even better, an 800 word opinion piece. And if you have the time, start adopting some of these social media sites. Go into them and do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Defend the people who are in the world of the CBC website comment section, the Globe and Mail comment section, the National Post comment section. Show up and defend the people who are bothering to explain IPCC science and the fact that we're running out of time to act on the climate crisis, and the fact that extreme weather conditions that we're experiencing increasingly are related to our addiction to fossil fuels, and that we need a transition plan to move away from that addiction. Get engaged in those places because you can help educate other Canadians before it's too late. We have, at this point, and I speak to you as doctors, is there a doctor in the House for Canadian democracy? Canadian democracy is on life support. We can revive it, we can resuscitate it, but it will take work. And it will not happen because of what goes on right now in Parliament Hill. It will only happen from what happens when you go home from here and keep talking to people, that we can make Canadian democracy work, but it will be work. Thank you. So, is there time for questions, people? Warren says I have time for questions. That's what I was hoping for.
We're nearly at 10. We're actually at 10, but I don't think anybody would like to have Elizabeth leave this building without somebody asking some questions. There's a microphone there and another microphone there. If you would like to ask a question.
Et aussi, je suis désolée, j'ai oublié de parler un peu en français, mais je suis disponible pour les questions en anglais ou en français.
C'est une conférence bilingue. So if anybody would like to go to one of the microphones. And if you just ask a question, that would be most appreciated, as opposed to a commentary.
Okay, I'll try to make this short, but with respect to the democracy issue, I'll give a
Tell me your name, because I'd love to know.
My name is Peter Kizoff. I live in Tiny, which is a small place in Simcoe County. So I'm in the riding of Simcoe North. It's represented by the Conservative Party of Canada, and a very nice man who's our member of Parliament. 3 weeks ago, he gave a group of us, 6 of us who represented the president of the Green Party, the NDP, and the Liberal, and a person like me from Fair Vote Canada, an electoral organization. We spoke to him about the Fair Elections Act. He listened to us for 90 minutes, that's 9-0. He made careful notes. He committed himself to conveying all this information to the Minister Poilievre of the file of the Fair Elections Act. And as you may know, I won't go on, but the minister has characterized any criticism of his bill as hyperbole and hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of listening for 90 minutes, our very pleasant, very accommodating, very thoughtful member of parliament said, summing up his position, which is what we asked him about at the end. The government signaled in its speech to the throne that it would be moving on this issue. It's a government bill, I will be supporting it. I'm just reflecting to you that around the table, the six of us had a jaw-dropping experience. What possible response is that to a list of experts across Canada, hundreds of academics, experts in the electoral field? The response was, to us, paraphrased, I am a rubber stamp, I will do what my leaders told me. So I guess I'm saying to you, where do we go from
Okay.
here?
Well, first of all, thank you, Peter, and thank you for taking the time. So it's Bruce Stanton, hey? Now, Bruce actually, I'll tell you one thing that's remarkable about Bruce is because he's also Deputy Speaker, and he actually told us this, we have something in Parliament called adjournment proceedings, which is after every, as you can imagine, at the end of the day, adjournment proceedings, questions that weren't adequately dealt with in question period, which is basically to say all of them, members of Parliament have the option of asking for further debate at adjournment proceedings. So parliamentarians call it late show for short. And Kirsty Duncan, who's a Liberal member of Parliament and used to be an IPCC scientist, she used to be environment critic. They've now moved her off that. It's another whole rant I have about taking people who understand the file and moving them off it in the opposition parties. But anyway, Kirsty and I did a lot, and I still do them, a lot of late shows on climate change. And Bruce actually came to us and said, I've learned so much from you guys in Late Show, and he actually signed up to the all-party climate caucus that we have, which is the Conservative who sits on the executive of that is back to aforementioned Michael Chong. So Bruce is, by my lights, a pretty good guy. So what's going on there? I would think it's quite likely that he went back to Pierre Poilievre and said, this is what I'm hearing from my community. A lot of Conservative caucus members had to have put a lot of pressure to get the changes that we got. So among the 300 or so amendments that we were dealing with that were just gavelled through, there were a number of amendments, approximately 30, from Pierre Poilievre that remove the worst aspects of the bill. They make it less awful. It's still not a good bill. I'm still going to have to vote. Well, I've still got report stage. So what it tells me about the situation is what you need to know is that MPs are still afraid to tell their constituents, I will work for you. And this is true in all parties. For the most part, the Conservatives and the NDP actually has tighter control of their MPs than the Conservatives do over theirs. Yes. It's the system that's wrong and broken, that the leaders have the power to tell their MPs when they're elected, you don't work for the people who elected you. You're not there to represent your constituency. You are there to represent our brand and do what we say. So it is a remarkable thing that he gave, that because most Conservative MPs don't have that kind of community interaction, that I hope he absorbed the information and took it back. Don't give up on him as a person. I believe that we have to keep trying to reach these MPs as individuals. Appeal to them at whatever good instincts you can find within them. And for some, it's more challenging than for others. You know, my brother likes to say, we're all beautiful children of God. Some are really amazingly disguised as complete sons of bitches. So you have to really look in some cases. But what you did helped. I'm sure of that. Don't give up trying if it feels like a wasted 90 minutes. It's worth trying, and it's also worth taking that experience and sharing it with the rest of the community in a letter to the editor to say this bill isn't good enough. And we are hoping and we are looking to Bruce Stanton to represent us and to change the system so that members of Parliament can represent their constituents and not their political parties, which is why Michael Chong's bill must pass.
Okay.
Because time is short, I'm sorry, I'll have to ask forgiveness from the two male speakers, and in interest of gender disparity, allow a question from this microphone from you, please. And please, if you could make it a question more than a